travel, he's effectively conceded a lot of Super Tuesday states already. He's conceded Colorado. I'm not speaking for the campaign, but he's not going to Colorado, Minnesota, Utah, Maine. There are places that go to California, and he talking about winning in Texas as a son of endorsements there might not be winning there. So the idea that he could get a huge bounce off this and change the map is I think a bit much. And then if you look at
are you there?
He's going to be. I'm still here.
Yeah, sorry, you just cut out. Yeah, go ahead. It's not going to change the map.
Well, if you're talking about momentum, there are places that have been early voting for weeks. I mean, Texas basically is wrapping up early voting this weekend. Like California has been early voting to the tunes of hundreds of thousands of votes. And we actually saw in 2016 there were a ton of votes for Jeb Bush in Texas, even though he dropped out before the primary. So a lot of votes are being locked in while Biden looked really weak. Now, where there are people who were deciding between Sanders and Biden, you kind of roll your eyes. But yeah, some people were. They shared some of the same demographics of white working class voters and also voters who just want to vote for the candidate that they were told can win. And Sanders actually didn't get a lot of Sanders can win coverage. Frankly, one thing that was on my mind as I was with Biden in Fort Sumter, or in Sumter, South Carolina, I should say, is that his poll numbers against Trump, his personal favorability, has been slipping since he started entering the race. But you don't really hear that discussed. You do hear anything negative about Sanders. So I think Sanders' momentum has been suppressed a bit by some of the coverage, some of his ability to bring a ton of new voters to turn out. And I think Biden's being helped by the underdog now.
But at the end of the day, I mean, I'm just trying to think of a scenario where it's like Biden gets a 12-point win in South Carolina, and then all of a sudden the money just pours in. Like, it's almost like the idea of like, oh my God, he's got this huge like, I can't even think, like, I just can't, like, there's no scenario. I mean, I can see that they may have a day or two where, like, he's the comeback, kid, in quotes. I mean, the comeback maybe guy. But the idea that, like, $20 million worth of money are going to roll into his campaign based upon that is super far-fetched. I mean, my sense is, and you tell me if this is what you know because you've been on the ground to a lot of these places, is that really it's just Sanders and Bloomberg are the only ones who have sort of the resources in terms of, not just in terms of dollars, but in terms of like people on the ground who have been there long enough to have developed like an infrastructure in these places.
That's true. Warren has an infrastructure in a number of Super Tuesday states. She's stronger than you might think in Texas. She's fairly strong in Minnesota. She was. And there are places where I think she's lost ground as voters have started to get nervous that she might not go the distance. But a lot of people had bigger organizations than Joe Biden. Biden has been depending on he was actually more of a slingshot Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton had pretty big organizations in Super Tuesday states. Biden has not been running ads there. Now, people know who he is, but he's not as present. And he hasn't built organizations beyond, big teams of endorsers. That is not harmful per se, but Virginia is a good example. There have been Sanders people canvassing for weeks. There haven't been people canvassing for Biden. He's got the endorsements of Tim Kaine today and a couple other people in Virginia politics. But it took a while. And that is, I mean, how many people does Tim Kaine get to knock on doors for him? That's the big question.
Right. All right. Well, Dave, is there anything that you feel like we haven't touched on? I mean, obviously we're going to talk on Super Tuesday, so we'll leave the powder dry there. But is there anything that you think is uncovered that we should be talking about today that's going to be relevant over the next couple of days?
Well, I think you nailed it pretty good. Well, you need to have clear eyes about what these primary votes mean. I mean, if all these Super Tuesdays, all the states before Super Tuesday were combined, that'd be the fourth biggest state on Super Tuesday. So most of the delegate selection is coming up. And even after Super Tuesday, 62% of the delegates are left. So you set that up pretty well. I mean, I would say that the Bloomberg factor is interesting here because the way that Biden win could affect things is if a voter who has seen Bloomberg's advertising and worries that Biden has been fading, if there's an idea that all they need to hear is, oh, Biden won something, then they will stop flirting with doesn't go back to him. But there's a question of how much Bloomberg already did in those states, and whether those votes split the right way. So continue looking out for the 15% threshold. Polling, sometimes we poll that warrants at 14%. People say she's getting no delegates. That's a little simplistic. If she's at 14, she's getting delegates in a lot of districts in the state. But that is the worry that anti-Sanders people had, for a year, and that they kind of stupidly fell into by just not deciding on one candidate basis.
Right.
Is there look at whether candidates are in a position to get any delegates at all, and if they're not, so here's how it works. Let's say there's 100 voters and Sanders gets 50 and two people get 25 each. That means they'll split the delegates 2-1-1 if there are 4 in the district. Let's say Sanders gets 50 delegates, one candidate gets 30 delegates, and then a bunch of other candidates split the rest but don't get 15. So that means they only are calculating the delegates based on those first 80 voters. And that's going to happen in a lot of places. That's what happened in Nevada, where only about 60% of voters picked either Sanders or Buttigieg or Biden in the first round, and that meant that 40% of voters voted for somebody who didn't get any delegates. That could repeat in a lot of places.
Oh, wow. Okay. And all right, so lastly, let me just ask you, that story that came out in the New York Times, I think it was yesterday, with 93 superdelegates they talked to, and they talked about,
right,
we're willing to kamikaze this. What's your sense of that piece, just, broadly speaking?
Yeah, well, that's classic Democratic strategy here of not coming with a plan, but panicking anyway. There's many ways that Sanders could lose the nomination. I think there's a sense by the Sanders people of creating momentum so that after Super Tuesday, it'll look like nobody can catch him. There actually would be time to catch him. The worry is that, and so the argument that they could use is the one Sanders used in the end of 2016, which is, let's say Sanders wins the primaries, but then he loses the last bunch of them.
Right.
And he comes into the convention with 35% of the delegates. I think there would be a conversation, not so much about the superdelegates, but let's say that other candidates combined for 60% and they form an alliance. That's the situation where people lose sometimes. And for the superdelegates, I'm glad that Reed Epstein Larry talked to them, because I don't think they understand how this stuff looks. And to them, it's just self-evident that Sanders can't win the election. I would give caution. There's an idea that they'd rather lose than nominate Sanders. I don't think that's true for most of these people. I think they honestly they've been told their whole lives someone like Sanders can't win. They just think they'd be nominating a guy who can't win the election despite everything you know about him. So that's what they're worried about. And in their minds, voters will say, oh, of course, we need anything we can to avert disaster. And I don't think they appreciate how people would actually look, even at, let's say, if Sanders had 35% of the vote and the next two candidates combined had the next two candidates had 30 and 25.
Right.
Even then, I think people would look skeptically on them trying to form an alliance.
I agree. All right, Dave, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Sorry that you didn't get a chance to see south of the border this time around, but maybe
sometime,
2024. All right, thanks.
All right, thanks, man.
Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. Dave Weigel. Dave, you want to come and join us? So, I mean, that's, it basically sounds like unless Joe Biden does something supernatural in South Carolina, nothing's going to change.
I mean, I would love to see him do something supernatural. If he does something supernatural, you know what? He has my vote.
There you go.
I'm not a purist. If he walks on water or something.
I was going to say, levitate, maybe, at the...
Any candidate that demonstrates supernatural abilities, I think, is going to deserve a second look.
The most supernatural ability Joe Biden could demonstrate was keeping his hands to himself. It's just like we're finishing a full sentence.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, joining us... Oh, we got to switch that button on the bottom there. I will vamp. Ladies and gentlemen, making her way to the studio and sitting down, Kate Willett.
Hello.
Kate, you are the host of Reply Guys.
Yes.
That's basically those are people who, in a thread, a guy will come in. I'm trying to think. I just saw a great example of. You always see one of those where somebody comes in you're an idiot. They say to a woman, a guy said,
Yeah.
You're an idiot, and you don't know anything about animals. And it's I'm the head of zoology.
Yes, totally.
Prestigious university.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that.
Yeah. We called it that because it's a feminist podcast where we talk about lefty politics stuff, and I think me and or my brother, my co-host Julia and I, both felt in 2016 that a lot of the online discourse was dominated by very loud dudes. So we wanted to give a nod to that, but also I think over the course of this election cycle, we're like, are we the reply guys? You know, the more and more mad we get about like the TNC, like thinking about taking it or whatever, we're like, yeah, you know, we're up in those threads as well.
Yeah,
Reply two becomes the replier. Exactly.
there you go. I almost as you corrected your grammar.
Yeah.
It's going to pop in and correct your grammar.
I know. I
Only
just.
after you did it, because I wouldn't have known. But I thought there was a joke. There was like a form function joke there.
Yeah, and I saw that like on the horizon, and I didn't want to force you to become the reply guy in that
Right.
moment.
I
So I was
appreciate
like,
that.
you know.
And you are also a professor of English at Columbia University.
Exactly. No, I'm just a comedian. I am a dirtbag feminist comedian. I'm an interest in selecting working interests and other election candidates.
I never replied to anybody online. You know how I maintain that literacy. Check it out.
Yes.
Well done.
Basic literacy in and of itself a communist plot. Did you see that tweet? No, I did not see that one.
Literacy is?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was some guy who frankly he was. He said he's a Reagan activist, like Poland, who said that the first thing communists do is teach you to read. This was in regards to the young guys. So if you are an anti-communist, maintaining illiteracy is
Every mark, you're illiterate.
Just put it out there.
Second, third.
I mean, because how many people are illiterate?
I guess coincidentally, I went with my ex-wife to produce her documentary in Cuba some 20 years ago, and it was in part on photographers. Well, it was all on photographers in Cuba, but some of whom were Castro's personal photographers to capture the revolution because illiteracy rates were so high that he knew that he had to tell the story of the revolution in photos. And that was the explicit sort of like game plan. And then of course he did expand literacy among other things. Down there, political progression. People were worried about saying things. I actually almost sunk the whole project by revealing to a guy in flip-flops and a tank top that we were doing a movie, and he apparently was like on a committee for the counter-revolution, and then we got our inside person at the cultural attaché, essentially, gave us word, and I had to create a whole thick of dummy tapes. Apparently that's what happened with La Bamba. They went down there, I think it was that movie La Bamba. They got to the airport with all their film, and
Was it Diamond Phillips?
I think it was it La Bamba, or it was some other, it was a movie, no, it wasn't La Bamba, it was one about these Cuban, I can't remember what the movie was now. No, not Motorcycle Tires.
It was social
music. No. What was it? No, it was not Godfather 2. It was
Scarface.
No, not Scarface. And they took all the footage. They had shot all the footage, and they just took it at the airport. That was, anyways. Let's talk coronavirus. Can we please? Kate, as you know, you are the head of epidemiology
Yes.
at Mount Sinai Hospital, and
The main thing that's important is nobody wash their hands ever.
There you go.
Ever.
We are in a sort of stunning era where we are watching, one of the problems with the autocracy of China is that you can't respond to things like this, at least initially, right? Like their denial of the problem exacerbated the problem. And then when it got to the point where it's got, they have the ability to shut things down. But there is real, I think, legitimate concern amongst at least some of the sort of experts I'm reading that they're beginning to become skeptical of the numbers that are coming out of China, that they think it's probably worse than is being reported. And so, I mean, I guess we won't know for a while, but, it's like watching Chernobyl. There's a lot of like CYA that goes on here. And now in this country, we're going through the same thing. Here's Donald Trump, the woman behind Donald Trump, as he's talking about it. She is, what is her position exactly? She's like the chief, what number clip is this? Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, this is Dr. Ann Schuchat, and she is one of the key players in sort of the response to the coronavirus. And we should make it clear that, she's the deputy director of the CDC. And watch her face as Donald Trump refers to how, like, this is not a big deal. It's like a common cold.
Any of their behaviors?
No, I think you have to always say, look, I do it a lot anyway, as you probably heard. Wash your hands, stay clean. You don't have to necessarily grab every handrail unless you have to. You do certain things that you do when you have the flu. I mean, view this the same as the flu. When somebody sneezes, I try and bail out as much as possible with the sneezing. I had a man come up to me a week ago. I hadn't seen him in a long time, and I said, how you doing? He said, fine. He hugs me. I said, are you well? He says, no. He said, I have the worst fever and the worst flu. And he's hugging and kissing me. So I said, excuse me. I went and I started washing my hands. So you have to do that. Watch your face. I really think, Doctor, you want to treat this like you treat the flu, right? And, it's going to be. Now, you can't see it. I love that. Footage is a little bit broken up, but the look on her face is like, but she can't get up and say that. And they have a concerted effort. Mike Pence's czarism on this is not, I'm going to coordinate all of the different efforts. It's, I'm in charge of making sure no one says anything that will reveal what's really going on. That seems like a problem, Kate, as a chief epidemiologist at various New York hospitals.
Yeah, it's certainly, I would say that my official medical opinion is that it's not good, especially in a country where we don't necessarily have healthcare available to every person. It seems like it could go wrong, but, what do I know?
Well, so much of this is about, we now have a whistleblower who's going out. Remember the chain of events here. The CDC, there were people coming from on a flight coming off of a cruise liner that people were afraid had been infected.
Yeah.
The CDC did not want to fly them back commercially.
This was a Scientology cruise? Is that a detail that was correct?
Is that right?
I think it was.
A Scientology cruise?
I think it was a Scientology cruise.
Is that right?
Gosh.
I can try to look that up. But
I'm not
They
sure.
do believe in physical ailments, right?
well,
yeah.
Sometimes with these cruise ships, people will have like conventions on like the cruise ship itself, but it not be like a Scientology cruise. Like they'll just have like a convention on like a particular cruise ship. Like they'll have like 150 people on.
Who knows? Anyways,
I went on a Rocky Roll cruise like that. It was like 100 punks and a bunch of normies on a Carnival cruise ship.
Yeah, that's largely irrelevant. The bottom line, though, is that you have these Americans. They're being repatriated. The CDC said we shouldn't do this. We shouldn't do this. And the Trump administration overruled them because they didn't want anybody to think like it was a big deal. It's like the Trump story. The guy had a fever. He came in and hugged me. And I'm like, come on, guy. And then, because they don't want to alarm anybody, Health and Human Services sent federal workers to go and deal with these people coming up, and did not equip them in any way properly, brought them to an air base, I guess, And this guy in California who has it, they're only suspecting because of the federal regulations that basically narrowed who should be tested for this. Federal regulations that were just propagated by the CDC being stepped on by the Trump administration. They can't quite figure out where it is, but they think it may have something to do with these workers. And a whistleblower has now come out and said that they had no monitoring, no testing regime in place, and it is the first U.S. contracted, not coming from overseas, but contracted within the U.S., comes from that general vicinity, and people are starting to speculate that it's a function of that. And then apparently, when someone at the Health and Human Services talks about it, they're criticized for hurting morale and then ordered to another position or to be fired by the administration. That seems to be, you're playing with fire.
Definitely seems that way. It seems like also that this could end up, like you were saying earlier, like I definitely think that they could possibly start alienating even people who have gone with them on, like, some of the other corruption stuff, like people who absolutely don't care about anything related to Ukraine or, Russia. I think could potentially be like, okay, well, I don't want my kid to get this virus. It might start like leaking into like people who voted for him actually.
I think that's true too, and the stock market has, look, I think the stock market is completely overrated in terms of an economic measure, and it is helping a very, I think, a fairly narrow subset of Americans, but they are highly sensitive to it, and as it drops, I think it starts to shake some of his support, even from like the wealthy folks.
I mean, the stock market as a measurement of like the faith that a particular part of the population has in the functioning of the country and of the world, is good for that. Unless you'll try to extrapolate.
Right.
But I mean, look, I'm not an epidemiologist like Kate, although I do have a master's in body language analysis.
A body language expert. Nice.
Ladies. But here's what I will say about the coronavirus, just apart from the points already made. Like, I think as epidemic, it has the ability to lay bare just how many gaps we have in our society at various levels and various points, and not just the ineptitude of the Trump administration, but like Katie said, it's like we live in a country where millions of people don't have health insurance, and not only do millions of people don't have health insurance or access to health care, even more people are health care precarious in a way that might lead them to roll the dice if they have the symptoms. Like, we have a culture of people who are just like afraid to go to the doctor, who have an instinctual fear of going to the doctor because, hey, what if I go to emergency room, my insurance company will only cover if I'm admitted, and so I go, and what happens, if I'm not sick, I'd rather just wait until it gets too bad, right? And so that's one aspect of it. And the second aspect, we have a culture of people, no paid time off. A lot of people don't have sick days. A lot of people can't take, for a lot of people, they take off to go to the doctor, they get coronavirus, that's their paycheck, that's their rent money. And so like you're weighing like health versus going to the doctor. And just another point that people have been making.
Right, I got news for you. Enjoy your salad at your next restaurant meal.
Yeah.
Worked by someone who doesn't have time off.
I mean, exactly. The CDC did a study a few years ago. It came out that they polled restaurant workers, and I'm sure you remember this, Sam. I might have heard it on your show. And they found out that 15% of restaurant workers come into work, despite the fact that they are sick with some kind of stomach contagion.
Yep.
That leads to like vomiting or diarrhea. So they come to work and they handle food and they do that's how salmonella spreads, and it'd be how the coronavirus spread. So there are so many little aspects of our society that are obviously always deleterious and like hurt people on an individual level, and they are able to be abstracted, or rather made into a discrete problem for individuals because we have a hard time conceptualizing something as social health. And so when you put an epidemic into the mix, people have a much easier time. It's like, oh yeah, all of these things that people struggle with all the time do not exist in vacuums. They're actually related to our society in sort of in a given flow way. And I would even say something that people are advising, or rather making the connection with, like, yeah, Medicare for all would have done a lot to abate this health crisis.
Yes.
But and so like obviously coronavirus is a public health crisis, but I would say it's a step further. It's like the lack of Medicare for all, the fact that we have so many people without access to healthcare, without access to medication, by itself was a public health crisis. And now that we have the influx of a pandemic or epidemic, I don't know the difference right now off the top of my head, but I used to. It's like that public health crisis is becoming visible to what it actually is, which is
Right.
Yeah, and the virus doesn't discriminate between who's poor and wwho's rich.
It's the great equalizer.
I mean, Bernie's always saying we're all in this together. Maybe that will help hammer the point home for some people. I saw a news story today about a guy who thought he had the coronavirus. He'd been to China. He got tested for it. And then he gets a bill for thousands of dollars. Then I saw Nancy Pelosi saying, oh, the vaccine should be affordable. People should have affordable access to it. Like, what the hell are you talking about?
Right.
Yeah.
Just give it to people.
Yeah, I mean, I am a comedian, and so most of my friends who are also comedians do not have any health insurance. And, if we need to go to the doctor, we just end up, paying cash. And, most of my friends...
You pay in jokes.
Yeah, but, I mean, honestly, most of the time, we end up trying to just cure stuff with, spells and herbs and stuff like that. And I feel like a lot of people are living like that, and that is fine with the ruling class in this country most of the time. But, it is going to be this thing where, at restaurants, the people who are serving your food may not have access to healthcare, and you may just, actually start to see people who normally don't care at all about the fact that a lot of working class people in this country don't have health care. It's going to start to affect their lives in a real way, potentially.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
will
so
doctors
illustrative.
Will doctors take a coupon for a free drink at Eastville or something like that?
Yeah, totally. I was just can I pay you in all these drink tickets I've compiled?
This is, again, the stock market has a lot of resonance with a small number of people, but these are the people on the vanguard of the sort of the Trump support of people who I think are, these are single issue voters on some level, and it's like, what's my stocks doing? And this is, Donald Trump has throughout his presidency talked about the stock market probably more consistently than anything else.
Yeah.
And this is they're on the this is Fox News, CNBC, and you can hear in the background apparently someone is just yelling about what's going on there. I don't know if they actually do this on the floor of the stock market, but watch this.
You'll look for stocks with good dividends and things like that.
Understand any derivative effect, if any, that could come out of these low interest rates. Stephanie was saying for shopping for housing loans, for instance.
So, but basically what's happening, I think, is that the reporter from the floor is speaking up to the studio, and they're picking up someone, some broker just going into a hallway, just going I can't find my shirt, and they're picking it up on that. I think is I think that's a problem for
Yeah, I mean that's his main argument for his own reelection is that the stock market was doing well and the economy was doing well, and if that changes, people are just this guy's pretty corrupt,
I mean, I think both are making great points, and I think the danger there too is him trying to craft a narrative that empowers his far right campaign in a way that spins he might lose some stockbrokers because the market's going to crash, but him trying to find a way to turn this into an argument against immigration, an argument against the I've mentioned it prior to Dave Weimel coming on, but we already have camps in place. They already floated the idea of putting homeless people there, and we've already seen that in the case of extreme public distress, people are willing to hand over some civil rights or look past certain things. So I think there is a slight danger that this is used.
They're definitely going to try.
Yeah.
They're definitely going to try. But the problem I think they're going to have with that is when it's clearly not a function of the coronavirus is not it's Italy that shut down. We do not share a border with Italy. The vast, overwhelming number of immigrants that come or visitors that come to this country from Italy do not go via Mexico. That just doesn't happen. And I think that's something they can sell to their, the core.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. But from the perspective of, again, suburban voters who are, to the extent that there are any swing voters in this, or to the extent that there are any voters who are going to come out and make it a referendum on Trump, and maybe the existence of a Bernie on the ticket might be, make it more of a decision. I think that's not going to work with them in the same way. Plus, the reality is, and I don't know from a political perspective if this has any salience, the reality is that our immigration policy in this country, scaring immigrants to the extent that we have, undocumented, is the worst case scenario you have when you're dealing with a pandemic.
Exactly.
Because these people, the last thing they're going to do, you talk about lack of health insurance being a reason why you don't go in. The idea that I could endanger my entire family and I could get kicked out of the country because I'm sick, I'm not going in. Literally, if this thing is as contagious as it sounds, we may have to see underground clinics that are set up to service folks who are afraid of going into the hospital and getting, because it would not be absurd for them to think I'm going to be on some type of registry and I don't want to do that. I can't be quarantined.
They're right. Honestly, then I think goes back to my point. It's an important point you're making. It's the infrastructure that would lead this pandemic to be uncontrollable is already there, or the lack of infrastructure. The ICE already does things like that. So anyone who pretends as though somebody not going to the hospital because they believe they have corona symptoms or is undocumented is behaving irrationally is wrong. It's because there's 100% chance that the ICE will come, not 100%. There's a very good chance that ICE will come in and to the hospital and you will be removed and then deported back to Mexico. And right now they're also trying to denaturalize people at the same time. And so escalating this is only going to cause more people to go underground and more people who might have symptoms to continue to try to avoid being on various lists or documented at hospitals. And so we already have all of the missing pieces in place in our society to make something like this go rampant, and now we have to actually sit down and question how we got so far down the line where it's very possible that a pandemic could just ravage America, and because we just don't have the infrastructure in place to deal with it.
Right, and we should be clear, I don't want people to panic too much. The death rate for this at this point, to the extent that we understand, is close to about 3.5%. Now, again, the numbers out of China are, certainly people are starting to question whether we actually know the real numbers. But it is extremely contagious. And really what is more likely that we're going to see is not just people in the suburbs worried about their kids in going to school, but it's also going to be Facebook just canceled their coders meeting in Santa Cruz, and Microsoft's not sending people to the gaming convention. And it's it's not irrational to entertain the notion that we may not have political conventions this year. It's not, I don't think we're there, and I think it's a big leap to say that that's going to be the case. But it is not irrational to entertain that notion that if big parts of Italy apparently are shutting down. This is, my daughter texted me today because my daughter's whole, she's got a cottage industry of taking the clothes that I buy her and then selling them online to Depop, and I don't know what that is. And then she sometimes uses the money she gets to buy stuff, and she texted me today, and she goes, I got a notice from Depop. Clothes I ordered on February 1st are not going to come. They don't know when it's coming because of coronavirus in China. I'm terrified. What am I going to do? And I'm like, well, they're not going to send you coronavirus in the mail. It's just but, we're going to start to see more and more of this. There's already apparently one now official shortage of a drug that has been announced by the CDC as of today. I don't know what the drug is because it's all being made in China. All right, well, before I want to take a break here and we'll go into the fun half. And when we come back, I want to talk about what the brain trust of the Republican Party, Rush Limbaugh, has instructed all of them to do, and they seem to be trying to do it, but it's hard. It's a hard thing for them to do. We'll be back in a moment with the fun half. In the meantime, just a reminder, this show relies on your support. You can go to jointhemajorityreport.com. Check out the AM Quickie, also justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Brandon, do you want to talk about the discourse? Where can people see that?
You can
I
find
hear that.
Huh? Well, you can't see it anywhere because it's all audio, which is why I do less visual jokes now. You can find Discourse on all of the major podcast platforms: Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, and you can also become a patron of the Discourse if you like how well I fill out this split screen. If you like the girth, you can become a patron at patreon.com/expanded discourse, where we have a special tier now.
Expanded discourse.
Expanded discourse. Expand,
I like
EXP. I know, it's great. We have a special tier now, 10%. I'll analyze your body language. I'm sorry, $10, and I'll analyze your body language via the internet.
Well, that's pretty good. That's even more impressive that you can't see it and you can actually assess it.
When you get to the level that I've gotten to in body language analysis, you don't require
to it.
It's intuitive. It's like you can sense it. You can see the chakra points.
Kate, now I know that you aren't as proficient at the body language thing.
Yeah.
But you are an epidemiologist.
Exactly. So you can find me at various hospitals in New York, diagnosing people with coronavirus and not washing my hands afterwards. You can find me, at a bunch of different places. I have a calendar online. I'm coming to Bloomington, Indiana soon to the Comedy Attic, and I'm coming to the Comedy Underground in Seattle in a couple weeks.
So how do you end up in Bloomington, Indiana, and then is there something, do you have a relationship with Bloomington, Indiana, or is you that's the way you like to barnstorm? I like to just go out to Indiana and then go all the way to Seattle.
Well, I'm doing comedy there. I'm not just visiting to spread coronavirus. I think the first time I ended up in Bloomington, Indiana was for a comedy festival called Limestone Comedy Festival, and then I ended up
and you made some fans there.
Yeah, I ended up coming back to that comedy club. And same thing with Seattle. I don't know. You just kind of put things together as a comedian. I have a podcast called Reply Guys that I talked about. And, it's a fun podcast. It's wherever podcasts are free, on SoundCloud and stuff, and Apple Podcasts. And I was also just on Colbert. So check me out on...
What's that?
The Late Show with Stephen Colbert was special on Netflix. I don't know. I didn't mean for this to go on for 5 minutes.
No,
I tell jokes.
What's the name of your special on Netflix?
It's part of a show called The Comedy Lineup, and it's not the jokes I told them there are not political. It's just about how I, like to hang out with skater boys and stuff like that from another time, and I hope to go back to it again when Bernie Sanders is the president. And I can just focus on not hooking up with immature.
I got some bad news for you.
Yeah.
That's what I said in the spring of 2004, waiting for the Bush campaign.
No, I understand, and I will continue to remain politically active when Bernie Sanders is the president, but, I'll at least put some energy into not dating skater boys anymore. Right now, I'm not even trying.
Right.
So look out, Beto.
Yeah.
You're on.
You could be fighting.
You and your giant teeth are pushing on notice.
Jamie, what's happening on the Antifada?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. This week on the Antifada, I spoke with Heather Fortune, formerly of the amazing post-punk band Wax Idols, about our canvassing trip to New Hampshire, the Bernie rally / Strokes concert, where one of our friends started a riot, how capitalism is ruining music, especially with regard to streaming services, and Heather spills the tea on why she quit the band White Lung, which probably none of you have heard of, but was once a really good band.
Matt?
Folks' Literary Hangover, most recent episode is on Ebenezer Cook's 1731 poem on Bacon's Rebellion. We talk about Bacon's Rebellion, George Washington's great grandfather's role in war crimes in Bacon's Rebellion, and some other things about it, so check it out.
And you can find TMBS at patreon.com, TMBS, or on YouTube, The Michael Brooks Show. Ben Dixon this week, right? I think it was.
Yeah, and Richard Wolff.
And Richard Wolff. All right, folks, quick break, fun half. See you there. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous, you're a little bit upset, you're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now. Win-win. It's a win-win-win.
Hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847 906 501 457 238 56 27 1/2 5 eighths 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil? Hitler was such an idiot. You think I miss these Nazis?
Agreed. No.
Death to America.
No.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way. Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get on.
No worries. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me...
Hey, shut up! Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
Yeah, we didn't make it. Is that Bullfrogs?
Bullfrogs.
Yeah. Yeah, they did a great job with that.
It's a delight.
Yeah, it's so funny.
Okay, yeah, let's do this. This is this is I'm trying to figure out, like, I want to do this in 4 acts. This is a 4-act play. Or I guess, yeah, it's a 4-act play that we have. It's not really even proper acts. I mean, I think both you guys would
Dramaturgy
recognize.
experts.
Yeah, the dramaturgy experts would take issue with my saying that these are actually 4 acts, because it's really more there is no we're not making the proper dramatic turns at each act. However, this is basically watching and this is ironic too, because I've used this example as to how we're going to end up suffering from the coronavirus from a societal perspective in terms of goods. Is, the snake has swallowed the rat a couple of months ago, and the rat has not made it all the way through the snake. And that is the disruption in our supply chain that we're going to start, once we start. It's not great, is it?
Oh, I just saw I was confused for a second because I was like, I thought you were talking about the Elizabeth Warren and Pete Buttigieg emoji.
I also love that.
So narrow.
I was like, yeah.
Where's it going?
Yeah.
I was actually talking about a real snake and a real rat. Snakes eat rats. and you can watch it actually sort of like go through the snake system. And I was using that as an example of like
the snake of our supply chain,
Yes.
the rat of our
exactly of the dislocation of the supply chain.
I understand. I just can't think about anything other than emojis right now.
I'm a very literal person, or it's figurative. I don't know, whatever the opposite, whatever makes what I said makes sense. Anyway, no, I mean, I think you're right. It's funny because we mentioned a lot of the ways in which our society is just not built to handle the coronavirus, but like it's funny how interconnected we are now. You know, you mentioned before like the masks that people need to like actually block out the coronavirus are made in China, and so we can't get them. So
we're also there's going to be about 150 drugs I think that we're about to have significant shortages of, including some antibiotics. And Matt Stoller is really the guy. If people want to follow this, I mean, I think some people would argue that he's a little bit. There's a little bit of hyperbole there, but I'm not quite convinced that it is hyperbole. But be that as it may, the other place you could use the actual snake and the actual rat, not the emojis, is to watch something come out of Rush Limbaugh's mouth and watch it travel through the conservative sphere. Now, Rush Limbaugh, and bless his heart, he has late-stage lung cancer. We don't know if this is going to, keep him from, but it slimmed him down, and so who knows what's going to happen with Rush. But he is still the intellectual pillar of the conservative movement, and Limbaugh always does this. If it's a massive storm that's coming up, he will always downplay it to his audience because, there's a lot of data that suggests that when there are natural phenomena like a hurricane or a storm or a pandemic, that the inability to respond by the government hurts incumbents. We saw this in Superstorm Sandy, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's a lot of data about this. Rush Limbaugh understands this, I think, and has always understood. So he has always made the bet, I'm going to always downplay everything that happens. That way, I mean, unless it's like, the Obama administration, in which case, Ebola was, I think they did, 24/7 about Ebola. But if there's a Republican administration, I'm going to downplay things because my bet I'm making is that more often than not, things don't turn out to be as bad as we think they are. Although, once in a while it does, Katrina, let's say, or something like that, and you just take the hit. And so this is what Rush Limbaugh has decided, and this playlet will show you that not only start with Rush Limbaugh, but it travels through the Republican conservative mindset. Here is Rush Limbaugh, 2 days ago, right?
Folks, this coronavirus thing, I want to try to put this in perspective for you. It looks like the coronavirus is being weaponized as yet another element to bring down Donald Trump. Now, I want to tell you the truth about the coronavirus. What, you think I'm wrong about this? You think I'm missing it by saying it's... Yeah, I'm dead right on this. The coronavirus is the common cold, folks. The drive-by media hype of this thing as a pandemic, as the Andromeda strain, as, oh my God, if you get it, you're dead. Do you know what I think the survival rate is 98%. 98% of people get the coronavirus, survive. It's a respiratory system virus. It probably is a Chi-Com laboratory experiment that is in the process of being weaponized. All superpower nations weaponize bio weapons. They experiment with them. The Russians, for example, have weaponized.
Okay, yeah, I mean, we can
weaponize weapons? Yeah.
Weaponize weapons, but he's lying to you, at least in the sense that right now the data suggests that it's actually 96.5% survival rate. So in other words, it kills 3.5% of people. That's not an insignificant amount of people.
And also it makes you wonder about how we would handle something more deadly.
Well, I mean, someone else can do the math here, but this is extremely contagious. So the number of people who who can contract this, say, as opposed to the flu or even the common cold, could be in the millions or tens of millions. I mean, this obviously is a worst case scenario. And then you can do the number, 3.5% of people, not such a small number, and that's presuming that the Chi-Coms, who, Limbaugh presumes created this, are telling us the truth about the figures there.
Which is what you do about your biological weapons.
Right, of course.
Well, I mean, also, like, if you had coronavirus and, you went to the doctor and they're like, oh, there's only a 3.5% chance that you're going to die, you'd still be, like, really upset that was on the table.
Not to mention,
yeah.
you're talking about, because it's such a contagion, like, so many people will be out of commission potentially for for a week or two.
And you have to stay in your house, right?
Yeah, and so this is going to have impact, not just like, it may not just kill you, it also may just like keep there from being drugs on the shelves.
Yeah.
It may keep you from being able to go to restaurants. Who knows? But he's going to downplay it and say that it's nothing. That's what Rush Limbaugh did. So Rush Limbaugh has announced that this is nothing but the common cold. It's been weaponized by the Chi-Coms. You have nothing to worry about. They're just talking about it. The media and the deep state CDC, the linchpin of the deep state is the CDC.
Also, if there was even, let's say he's right, and there was even a 2% chance that the common cold could kill you, and people were just dropping dead from the cold all the time, I think we would all be really upset by that.
I have a feeling some people would complain.
Yeah.
I think we would be very, very serious about the way we took getting a common cold. It would be sort of a problem. Well, lest you think that Rush Limbaugh no longer has, now he's the he's the freedom the Medal of Freedom winner, and of course now that he is not only the Medal of Freedom winner, he's always been the intellectual pillar of the right. Therefore, everyone in that ecosphere needs to hear it. Here is the first entry in the person who is taking their talking points from Rush Limbaugh. It is, of course, Donald Trump Jr. on Fox and Friends.
Are you surprised the way they've been handling the coronavirus situation, meaning Democrats?
Not at all. I mean, we've seen, like you said, we've seen this play out for 4 years. Anything that they can use to try to hurt Trump, they will. Anything he does in a positive sense, like you heard from the reporter that was just suspended from ABC, they will not give him credit for. The playbook is old at this point. But for them to try to take a pandemic and seemingly hope that it comes here and kills millions of people so that they can end Donald Trump's streak of winning is a new level of sickness. I don't know if this is coronavirus or Trump derangement syndrome, but these people are infected badly. To run that in the New York Times, this isn't Fox. This isn't one of these, crazy left-wing journalists. This is the New York Times as writing this. It's seriousness. It's truly sick. Now,
there it is. The Democrats are weaponizing this weapon.
Yeah, they're going to start talking about gaslighting soon. It's coming. It started on the left, but it's moving to these people anytime. Well, if anything, it shows the Trump camp knows that they are uniquely vulnerable in the area of coronavirus. Yeah.
I will say, just 2 points. Rush Limbaugh looks nice with the beard. I like the beard. I don't want to, politics aside, I think the beard's a good look for him. Not so much for Donald Trump Jr. He has a little bit of a Mac from Always Sunny vibe going on.
Yeah.
But like played straight. But I will say, I mean, I love this because I love conspiracy theories. Not coronavirus.
Right.
I'm not in love with respiratory infections. As someone with asthma, I'm incredibly vulnerable to them. But I will say, it's like they're trafficking in conspiracy theories. It's like, this is classic conspiratorial thinking. The Chinese, the foreign government, especially the Chinese or the Russians, have created a bioweapon in order to delegitimize the Russian president, the United States president, and also kill a bunch of Americans. Like that's classic conspiratorial thinking.
It's also sort of a long way to go when you got to shut down like 3 of your cities to play this, to make it seem like it was really real.
The entire cities were crisis actors.
Exactly.
Yeah, crisis cities, if you will.
All of China's a crisis. They're crisis actors.
Yeah. It's a revolutionary discipline.
I went on Google Maps, and guess what I can't find? Wuhan.
the place where it supposedly started?
False flag.
Probably not.
Wuhan,
It's actually
yeah.
Wuhan.
Oh, well, that's probably why I couldn't find
False
it. Yeah, all
flag.
right, okay, well, that's not the false.
But it relies on they know their audience. Like Rush Limbaugh knows his audience.
Yeah.
Like Rush Limbaugh, I think maybe more so than anybody else. He's been in the game for a long time. He's not stupid. He's just bad. He's just bad. He knows his audience. He knows what's going to play to his audience. In this narrative,
He's constructed his audience.
he's cultivated and he's led them down a far right rabbit hole that makes them very susceptible to this kind of logic. The logic of like, you know what, even if it's not bad, but if it is bad, it's not that bad, but if it is bad, it's it's the force of foreign government. So he can have it both ways.
And it's not just a foreign government, it's also the Democrats who have been like the midwives of this in this country. And so lest you think that, okay, so Rush Limbaugh says it, and then Donald Trump Jr. says it, but, I mean, at least this isn't going to, like, anybody who has any real position of authority in our government. Let's say, like, the guy who's in charge of basically the president, like the chief of staff.
Yeah.
Here's Mick Mulvaney
Oh, no.
at CPAC, of course. And, there used to be a time where like, when CPAC would roll around in the AM talk radio business, it was like, this is great. We're not going to have to do any work for 2 days because we're just going to have clips of the insanity at CPAC. And now it's like, you can barely tell it's happening because it's almost identical to everything that happens in our government. And here is that blend right there. Mick Mulvaney at CPAC explaining to everyone what essentially Rush Limbaugh has told him to say.
The reason you're saying so much attention to it today is that they think this is going to be what brings down the president. That's what this is all about. I got a note today from a reporter saying, "What are you going to do today to calm the markets?" I'm like, really, what I might do today to calm the markets is tell people to turn their televisions off for 24 hours.
He's talking about the coronavirus.
Yeah.
So apparently, if you turn off your television for 24 hours,
That's how it's transmitted.
that is cable.
It's like Videodrome.
Yeah.
The hundreds of thousands of people, or I should say the nearly 100,000 people who have contracted it now, and the almost 3,500 who have died from it, and the millions who are literally being sequestered, and all the production entities in the various countries that are now having these spontaneous outbreaks will all go away. It may be 24 hours, turn off your television. It may be like 24 months, turn off your television, and then you won't know.
Well, I like how they have changed the question from how are the people in charge responding to this to how are Democrats responding to it? Like, what is basically like what is the media framing versus like what are we actually doing about this potential pandemic?
Right. The DNC has done nothing about coronavirus.
Yes.
I mean, even that's a facet of our society, our culture that is going to exacerbate the problem. Where it's going to be turned into like an optics issue. It's going to be turned into like a gamesmanship issue, which in many ways is going to get in the way of actually tackling the root cause, which is the fact that we have a virus.
That has actually been at this point why we have, to the extent that we have now an outbreak in this country, could be largely attributed to the notion that the Trump administration did not want bad optics. And I think, as much as they want to frame this, the media does, I think it's quite possible that actual events on the ground are going to overtake any type of media narrative they're trying to drive. Here is a perfect example of that. This is, Rush Limbaugh has tried to make the case that this is nothing. And we see Donald Trump Jr. follow. We see Mick Mulvaney follow to the point where it's like all you need is turn off your TV and you won't see anything. And here is Fox News. This is not Fox and Friends. This is what Ed Henry and who else? I don't know. 2 Fox people. Ed and Shannon show. And they are interviewing to show everybody, this is no big deal, folks. They're interviewing a Pennsylvania family that has returned home after quarantine. I'm not clear. Did they have the disease? They did. Okay, and they were quarantined for a while.
The daughter at first, 2 weeks ago or so, and now it looks like it might have spread to the whole family.
Okay, but now they're absolutely fine. You're going to be so assured that everything is fine when you watch this video. Here it is. We brought them on to show, hey, folks, nothing to worry about here.
I think as time goes forward, hopefully doctors and scientists will get a better handle on the whole situation. fortunately, from what I understand, it is contagious, but the death rate is pretty low. So,
Oh no.
yeah, I understand the fear.
Yeah, well, we can see you still have a cough. What do the doctors say about your own condition moving forward as we wrap this up?
Oh no.
They said, yeah, I'm fine. I got tested twice, negative both times.
The face you
cough,
make,
probably just nerves.
yeah, being on TV.
Oh my
Are
god.
they in the studio?
No, are you kidding?
I
They're not gonna let them in the
but
studio.
I was just checking. I did not think so.
They're in a very remote, I think, studio. Look,
They're so cute, and I really hope they're
I
okay.
don't want this to come with the wrong. It's gonna sound like wrong, but I trust people to not interpret it wrong. It's like my man looks terrible. It's just like he looks like terrible.
Sweaty. I mean, he could be just nervous.
And a
Almost
hoodie.
seems like they're being punked.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look, there's three scenarios here. One is, and we got to say this, that is a comedian, and if he is, or like one of those, the Yes Men type of guys, or the Good Liars, I think they were called. And if he is, that dude, honestly, should be just give him a Netflix special, just a one-off, just so that he can you could replay that over and over again. I think it was exceptionally well done. The other scenario is, okay, she had it. He said he tested negative for it, so he's fine, and they're going to be fine, and they escaped the whole thing, and it is, in fact, he's just coughing because he's nervous. And then the third scenario is she had it, and now he's catching something, and they're sharing a water bottle, and they're not he's got flop sweat, and this whole attempt to make everybody feel like nothing to worry about here may have backfired.
That. If he's a comedian, then his daughter must also be one and in on the bit because she has amazing timing otherwise. Because the face she made when he drank her water and then she was like, it's that's not good. That's not good.
She was good. I mean,
the costume
let me have a little bit. Can we play that again?
She's so small, and I just want to say one more time that I hope these people are okay.
Oh yes, no, definitely, definitely.
I don't want to laugh at something bad happening.
No. I mean, supposedly they're out of the woods now.
Oh,
but,
good.
But this point, when he grabs the bottle, he says, "Let me have some." That to me makes
the
me feel
death
like
rate is pretty low.
Oh my god.
So, yeah, I understand the fear.
Yeah, well, we can see you still have a cough. What do the doctors say about your own condition moving forward as we wrap this up?
They said, yeah, I'm fine.
I can only
They both have
imagine. I can only imagine with the look on the Fox News host face when he's doing this.
I'm convinced that they walked off the set after this segment and they just went over to the producer and they got to go, what the are you doing?
Yeah.
Are you telling me we're putting that guy on to make everybody feel like there's no problem
They
here?
have snot running down their noses. Yeah, it's it's a full booger situation.
Total.
He looks very haggard. He probably, honestly, if we're being fair, he was probably in quarantine. He's under a lot of stress.
Absolutely.
He probably got sick for something else because he's just under so much stress. But still, the optics.
Yeah, let's be clear. This was done. They didn't bring these people. They don't bring the kid on to this is not a hard news segment where it's we're going to get to the bottom of what it's like to be. This is, bring the child on there because we want to show. We've been told by Rush Limbaugh that this is really just a ploy for the Democrats to make everybody panic. We need to show everybody that, because this is a pure piece of propaganda, that everything is fine. And I think the thing that's so amazing about it is that hopefully these people are fine, but as a piece of propaganda that you watch, total fail.
If they're not fine, it wouldn't be funny. But if they turn out they're not, if they get
horrible,
if they get put back in quarantine the next week, that would just be whoa.
Everybody in that studio, incidentally, also.
That would really shut down Fox News. But you're right. So the narrative that Rush Limbaugh is trying to craft. I listen to a lot of conspiracy theories about a lot of different, even about outbreaks and everything. It's he's trying to have it both ways. He wants to say it's not a big deal, But if it turns out that he's wrong in the future, he can blame it on the Chinese. It's like, oh, we were wrong. It turns out that the Chinese created that's more of a that's kind of Rush Limbaugh impression. Anyway, we were wrong. It turned out that the Chinese, had built some sort of weird, a time delay into it, and that's why I was underestimating how insidious they were. But that because the first kind of narrative, it's not a big deal. Like you mentioned earlier, though, the suburban house mom population, it doesn't work on them. It's like everything becomes a big deal when you have a certain level of anxiety surrounding disease. Like the idea of outbreaks and diseases spreading is so deeply ingrained in the industrialization, urbanization of society. Like the fact that when we all came together was one of the first things. Like, hey, diseases might spread, and people leave. The people who go to the suburbs, like they do so to escape. Escape from stuff like that. They do so to avoid having to be on trains with people who are coughing and sneezing, and so their kids can be in these monochromatic little suburbs, and it's not a good look.
Although I think that there are, I'm not sure that this is true exactly, but I feel like I've heard about some disease outbreaks in the suburbs more because a lot of people aren't vaccinating their kids.
Anti-vaccination.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. I mean, but that again, but you can even look that into this exact conversation because people don't vaccinate their kids because they don't trust the government.
Yeah.
And so the kind of narrative that Rush Limbaugh is trying to craft is one that it centers. Well, you can trust the Trump administration, if not the deep state.
Well, the deep state, of course, the CDC, always the first place you go.
When I think of who's working with Chinese communists, I think of the CIA. I think infiltrate and control the narrative. That's what's on their little.
That's right. You missed the boat with the CDC.
If Fox News and Rush Limbaugh really want to drive the point home that coronavirus is not a big deal, they'll all get infected with it on purpose, and then they can show us that they're fine.
This is basically the same thing they did with waterboarding. They all club get.
Or when what's his name drank a glass of fracking water. Oh my gosh. Or Flint water. Obama. Yeah.
Obama.
Damn. Yeah.
And I think so one of the executives were.
Also, this guy is apparently a real guy, and he has a GoFundMe set up for coronavirus-related costs.
Yeah, Frank Wojcicki or something. I forget what his name is, but if he is a comedian, he's been fooling the media for about 2 or 3 weeks now. So
he's a crisis actor, obviously. The Dems hired Frank Wojcicki. I don't know. I can't pronounce that. To go into Fox News to try to deal with Gizzard Bob.
What are the rules for child crisis actors? Are they only allowed to be on set?
Yeah, this is really sad. This is coming from his Twitter. My father-in-law just died. My wife is alone in Wuhan. She can't even give her father a proper burial. I need to get her here. China has disallowed funerals as and other traditional death rites. My wife can't hold a vigil as the people at the Miramar base have agreed to help me hold a ceremony here. Thank you. That's why he was there in Wuhan. I mean, that's an example, even though the whole family fortunately is okay, of the impact of this virus is that it's going to shut down a lot of things if it gets anywhere close to what is happening over there.
And we're a global culture now. It's we do have very, very strict regulations. Strict regulations on immigration, but for a lot of people, this is a global. The economy, it makes it we're a global world.
Well, that's what I was saying. They're going to go out there and they're going to say, this is a function of immigrants, and we got to close the border. All right, well, close the border. There is not a border, or if you're going to close the border, that means you close the entire border. You stop flights coming in from international flights. Yeah. You stop ships bringing in stuff, because there's merchant seamen on these boats, and they could be carrying stuff. Everything's got to dock 7 miles out, and we'll send dinghies out there to get the frozen carrots.
And last time I heard, our docks are incredibly poorly secured.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I heard that.
It's always been a problem since 9/11. Well, since 9/11, people have talked about it.
Well, it points to larger issues of globalization, right? In a very real and concrete way this time. Because Trump has banked on identifying problems caused by globalization, labor issues. Obviously, he doesn't care about workers, but he's saying, the jobs are going away. You guys have all these problems. We got the opioid epidemic. and saying the solution to this is closing the borders and trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube and turning us back into some sort of autarky where we make everything we need here. The left response to this has to be different. It has to be internationalist. It has to be coherent.
I actually think that the left response to this needs to be that we need to bring back actually some of our manufacturing here, because this is going to expose the danger of concentrating, regardless of who has it. I mean, it's adds to the problem that it's an economic rival. But I don't know any country that would basically say, like, oh, yeah, we don't want these other countries to have a shortage of antibiotics, so we're going to forego the antibiotics, the manufacturing capacity here for our own antibiotics, and we're going to send it there. No, we do need, I think, every country that can produce their own should be producing it on some level because of this very reason, that you have 1%. One in 5 risks is a good risk to take. LOL.
Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. What the